In these next chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, the teaching deepens. Krishna begins to reveal the timeless nature of spiritual wisdom, explaining how divine knowledge is passed down through the ages. Arjuna learns about the path of selfless action, the difference between action and inaction, and the deeper meaning behind sacrifice and spiritual discipline. Together, chapters 4 through 6 explore how a person can live in the world, act with clarity, and gradually attain inner mastery. Let's begin. Chapter 4. The deity said, "This everlasting system of devotion I declared to the sun. The sun declared it to Manu, and Manu communicated it to Ikshvaku. Coming thus by steps, it became known to royal sages. But, O terror of your foes, that devotion was lost to the world by long lapse of time. That same primeval devotion I have declared to you today, seeing that you are my devotee and friend, for it is the highest mystery." Arjuna said, "Later is your birth, the birth of the sun is prior. How then shall I understand that you declared this first?" The deity said, "I have passed through many births, O Arjuna. I and you also. I know them all, but you, O terror of your foes, do not know them. Even though I am unborn and inexhaustible in my essence, even though I am Lord of all beings, still I take up the control of my own nature and am born by means of my delusive power. Whensoever, O descendant of Bharata, piety languishes and impiety is in the ascendant, I create myself. I am born age after age for the protection of the good, for the destruction of evildoers, and the establishment of piety. Whoever truly knows thus my divine birth and work casts off this body and is not born again. He comes to me, O Arjuna. Many from whom affection, fear, and wrath have departed, who are full of me, who depend on me, and who are purified by the penance of knowledge, have come into my essence. I serve men in the way in which they approach me. In every way, O son of Pritha, men follow in my path. Desiring the success of actions, men in this world worship the divinities, for in this world of mortals, the success produced by action is soon obtained. The fourfold division of castes was created by me according to the appointment of qualities and duties. But though I am its author, know me to be inexhaustible and not the author. Actions defile me not. I have no attachment to the fruit of actions. He who knows me thus is not tied down by actions. Knowing this, the men of old who wished for final emancipation performed action. Therefore, do you too perform action as was done by men of old in olden times. Even sages are confused as to what is action, what inaction. Therefore, I will speak to you about action, and learning that, you will be freed from this world of evil. One must possess knowledge about action. One must also possess knowledge about prohibited action. And again, one must possess knowledge about inaction. The truth regarding action is abstruse. He is wise among men, he is possessed of devotion, and performs all actions, who sees inaction in action, and action in inaction. The wise call him learned, whose acts are all free from desires and fancies, and whose actions are burnt down by the fire of knowledge. Forsaking all attachment to the fruit of action, always contented, dependent on none, he does nothing at all, though he engages in action. Devoid of expectations, restraining the mind and the self, and casting off all belongings, he incurs no sin, performing actions merely for the sake of the body. Satisfied with earnings coming spontaneously, rising above the pairs of opposites, free from all animosity, and equable on success or ill success, he is not fettered down, even though he performs actions. The acts of one who is devoid of attachment, who is free, whose mind is fixed on knowledge, and who performs action for the purpose of the sacrifice are all destroyed. Brahman is the oblation. With Brahman as a sacrificial instrument, it is offered up. Brahman is in the fire, and by Brahman it is thrown. And Brahman, too, is the goal to which he proceeds who meditates on Brahman in the action. Some devotees perform the sacrifice to the gods, some offer up the sacrifice by the sacrifice itself in the fire of Brahman. Others offer up the senses, such as the sense of hearing, and others in the fires of restraint. Others offer up the objects of sense, such as sound and so forth, into the fires of the senses. Some again offer up all the operations of the senses and the operations of the life breaths into the fire of devotion by self-restraint, kindled by knowledge. Others perform the sacrifice of wealth, the sacrifice of penance, the sacrifice of concentration of mind, the sacrifice of Vedic study and of knowledge, and others are ascetics of rigid vows. Some offer up the upward life breath into the downward life breath, and the downward life breath into the upper life breath, and stopping up the motions of the upward and downward life breaths, devote themselves to the restraint of the life breaths. Others, who take limited food, offer up the life breaths into the life breaths. All of these, conversant with the sacrifice, have their sins destroyed by the sacrifice. Those who eat the nectar-like leavings of the sacrifice repair to the eternal Brahman. The world is not for those who perform no sacrifice. Whence then the other, O best of the Kauravas? Thus, sacrifices of various sorts are laid down in the Vedas. Know them all to be produced from action, and knowing this, you will be released from the fetters of this world. The sacrifice of knowledge, O terror of your foes, is superior to the sacrifice of wealth, for action, O son of Pritha, is wholly and entirely comprehended in knowledge. That you should learn by salutation, question, and service. The men of knowledge who perceive the truth will teach knowledge to you. Having learnt that, O son of Pandu, you will not again fall thus into delusion, and by means of it you will see all beings, without exception, first in yourself and then in me. Even if you are the most sinful of all sinful men, you will cross over all trespasses by means of the boat of knowledge alone. As a fire well kindled, O Arjuna, reduces fuel to ashes, so the fire of knowledge reduces all actions to ashes. For there is in this world no means of sanctification like knowledge, and that one perfected by devotion finds within oneself in time. He who has faith, whose senses are restrained, and who is assiduous, obtains knowledge. Obtaining knowledge, he acquires, without delay, the highest tranquility. He who is ignorant and devoid of faith, and whose self is full of misgivings, is ruined. Not this world, nor the next, nor happiness is for him whose self is full of misgivings. Actions, O Dhananjaya, do not fetter one who is self-possessed, who has renounced action by devotion, and who has destroyed misgivings by knowledge. Therefore, O descendant of Bharata, destroy with the sword of knowledge these misgivings of yours which fill your mind and which are produced from ignorance. Engage in devotion. Arise. Chapter 5. Arjuna said, O Krishna, you praise renunciation of actions and also the pursuit of them. Tell me determinately which one of these two is superior. The deity said, Renunciation and pursuit of action are both instruments of happiness. But of the two, pursuit of action is superior to renunciation of action. He should be understood to be always an ascetic who has no aversion and no desire. For, O you of mighty arms, he who is free from the pairs of opposites is easily released from all bonds. Children, not wise men, talk of Sankhya and Yoga as distinct. One who pursues either well obtains the fruit of both. The seat which the Sankhyas obtain is reached by the Yogas also. He sees truly who sees the Sankhya and Yoga as one. Renunciation, O you of mighty arms, is difficult to reach without devotion. The sage possessed of devotion attains Brahman without delay. He who is possessed of devotion, whose self is pure, who has restrained his self, and who has controlled his senses, and who identifies his self with every being, is not tainted though he performs actions. The man of devotion, who knows the truth, thinks he does nothing at all when he sees, hears, touches, smells, eats, moves, sleeps, breathes, talks, throws out, takes, opens or closes the eyelids. He holds that the senses deal with the objects of the senses. He who, casting off all attachment, performs actions dedicating them to Brahman is not tainted by sin, as the lotus leaf is not tainted by water. Devotees, casting off attachment, perform actions for attaining purity of self with the body, the mind, the understanding, or even the senses, all free from egoistic notions. He who is possessed of devotion, abandoning the fruit of actions, attains the highest tranquility. He who is without devotion and attached to the fruit of action is tied down by reason of his acting in consequence of some desire. The self-restrained, embodied self lies at case within the city of 9 portals, renouncing all actions by the mind, not doing nor causing anything to be done. The Lord is not the cause of actions, or of the capacity of performing actions amongst men, or of the connection of action and fruit. But nature only works. The Lord receives no one's sin nor merit either. Knowledge is enveloped by ignorance, hence all creatures are deluded. But to those who have destroyed that ignorance by knowledge of the self, Such knowledge, like the sun, shows forth that supreme principle. And those whose mind is centered on it, whose very self it is, who are thoroughly devoted to it, and whose final goal it is, go never to return, having their sins destroyed by knowledge. The wise look upon a Brahmana possessed of learning and humility, on a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a svapka as alike. Even here, those have conquered the material world whose mind rests in equability. Since Brahman is free from defects and equable, therefore they rest in Brahman. He who knows Brahman, whose mind is steady, who is not deluded, and who rests in Brahman, does not exult on finding anything agreeable, nor does he grieve on finding anything disagreeable. One whose self is not attached to external objects obtains the happiness that is in one's self. And by means of concentration of mind, joining oneself with the Brahman, one obtains indestructible happiness. For the enjoyments born of contact between senses and their objects are, indeed, sources of misery. They have a beginning as well as an end. O son of Kunti, a wise man feels no pleasure in them. He who even in this world, before his release from the body, is able to bear the agitations produced from desire and wrath, is a devoted man. He is a happy man. The devotee whose happiness is within himself, whose recreation is within himself, and whose light of knowledge also is within himself, becoming one with the Brahman, obtain the Brahmic bliss. The sages whose sins have perished, whose misgivings are destroyed, who are self-restrained, and who are intent on the welfare of all beings, obtain the Brahmic bliss. To the ascetics, who are free from desire and wrath, and whose minds are restrained, and who have knowledge of the self, the Brahmic bliss is on both sides of death. The sage who excludes from his mind external objects, concentrates the visual power between the brows, and making the upward and downward life breaths even, confines their movements within the nose, who restrains senses, mind, and understanding, whose highest goal is final emancipation, from whom desire, fear, and wrath have departed, is, indeed, forever released from birth and death. He, knowing me to be the enjoyer of all sacrifices and penances, the great Lord of all worlds, and the friend of all beings, attains tranquility. Chapter 6. The deity said, He who, regardless of the fruit of actions, performs the actions which ought to be performed, is the devotee and renouncer. Not he who discards the sacred fires, nor he who performs no acts. Know, O son of Pandu, that what is called renunciation is devotion, for nobody becomes a devotee who has not renounced all fancies. To the sage who wishes to rise to devotion, action is said to be a means, and to him, when he has risen to devotion, tranquility is said to be a means. When one does not attach oneself to objects of sense, nor to action, renouncing all fancies, then is one said to have risen to devotion. A man should elevate his self by his self. He should not debase his self, for even a man's own self is his friend. A man's own self is also his enemy. To him who has subjugated his self by his self is a friend. But to him who has not restrained his own self behaves inimically like an enemy. The self of one who has subjugated his self and is tranquil is absolutely concentrated on itself in the midst of cold and heat, pleasure and pain, as well as honor and dishonor. The devotee whose self is contented with knowledge and experience, who is unmoved, who has restrained his senses, and to whom a sod, a stone, and gold are alike, is said to be devoted. And he is esteemed highest who thinks alike about well-wishers, friends, and enemies, and those who are indifferent, and those who take part with both sides, and those who are objects of hatred and relatives, as well as about the good and the sinful. A devotee should constantly devote his self to abstraction, remaining in a secret place, alone, with his mind and self restrained, without expectations, and without belongings. Fixing his seat firmly in a clean place, not too high nor too low, and covered over with a sheet of cloth, a deerskin, and blades of kusa grass, and there seated on that seat, fixing his mind exclusively on one point, with the workings of the mind and senses restrained, he should practice devotion for purity of self. Holding his body, head, and neck even and unmoved, remaining steady, looking at the tip of his own nose, and not looking about in all directions, with a tranquil self, devoid of fear, and adhering to the rules of Brahmacarins, he should restrain his mind and concentrate it on me, and sit down engaged in devotion, regarding me as his final goal. Thus, constantly devoting his self to abstraction, a devotee whose mind is restrained attains that tranquility which culminates in final emancipation and assimilation with me. Devotion is not his, O Arjuna, who eats too much, nor his who eats not at all, not his who is addicted to too much sleep, nor his who is ever awake. That devotion which destroys all misery is his, who takes due food and exercise, who toils duly in all works, and who sleeps and awakes in due time. When a man's mind well restrained becomes steady upon the self alone, then he, being indifferent to all objects of desire, is said to be devoted. As a light standing in a windless place flickers not, that is declared to be the parallel for a devotee, whose mind is restrained, and who devotes his self to abstraction. That mental condition, in which the mind restrained by practice of abstraction ceases to work, in which, too, one seeing the self by the self is pleased in the self, in which one experiences that infinite happiness which transcends the senses, and which can be grasped by the understanding only, and adhering to which one never swerves from the truth, acquiring which one thinks no other acquisition higher than it, and adhering to which one is not shaken off even by great misery. That should be understood to be called devotion, in which there is a severance of all connection with pain. That devotion should be practiced with steadiness and with an undesponding heart, abandoning, without exception, all desires which are produced from fancies, and restraining the whole group of the senses on all sides by the mind only, one should, by slow steps, become quiescent, with a firm resolve coupled with courage, and fixing his mind upon the self, should think of nothing. Wherever the active and unsteady mind breaks forth, there one should ever restrain it and fix it steadily on the self alone. The highest happiness comes to such a devotee whose mind is fully tranquil, in whom the quality of passion has been suppressed, who is free from sin, and who is become one with Brahman. Thus, constantly devoting his self to abstraction, a devotee, freed from sin, easily obtains that supreme happiness, contact with the Brahman. He who has devoted his self to abstraction by devotion, looking alike on everything, sees the self abiding in all beings and all beings in the self. To him who sees me in everything and everything in me, I am never lost, and he is not lost to me. The devotee who worships me abiding in all beings, holding that all is one, lives in me, however he may be living. That devotee, O Arjuna, is deemed to be the best, who looks alike on pleasure or pain, whatever it may be, in all creatures, comparing all with his own pleasure or pain. Arjuna said, I cannot see, O destroyer of Madhu, how the sustained existence is to be secured of this devotion by means of equanimity, which you have declared in consequence of fickleness. For, O Krishna, the mind is fickle, boisterous, strong, and obstinate. And I think that to restrain it is as difficult as to restrain the wind. The deity said, Doubtless, O you of mighty arms, the mind is difficult to restrain and fickle. Still, O son of Kunti, it may be restrained by constant practice and by indifference to worldly objects. It is my belief that devotion is hard to obtain for one who does not restrain his self. But by one who is self-restrained and assiduous, it can be obtained through proper expedients. Arjuna said, What is the end of him, O Krishna, who does not attain the consummation of his devotion, being not assiduous, and having a mind shaken off from devotion, though full of faith? Does he, fallen from both paths, go to ruin like a broken cloud, being, O you of mighty arms, without support, and deluded on the path leading to the Brahman? Be pleased, O Krishna, to entirely destroy this doubt of mine, for none else than you can destroy this doubt. The deity said, O son of Pritha, neither in this world nor the next is ruin for him. For, O dear friend, none who performs good deeds comes to an evil end. He who is fallen from devotion attains the world of those who perform meritorious acts, dwells there for many a year, and is afterwards born into a family of holy and illustrious men. Or he is even born into a family of talented devotees. For such a birth as that in this world is more difficult to obtain. There he comes into contact with the knowledge which belonged to him in his former body, and then again, O descendant of Kuru, he works for perfection. For even though reluctant, he is led away by the self-same former practice, and although he only wishes to learn devotion, he rises above the fruits of action laid down in the divine word. But the devotee, working with great efforts, and cleared of his sins, attains perfection after many births, and then reaches the supreme goal. The devotee is esteemed higher than the performers of penances, higher even than the men of knowledge, and the devotee is higher than the men of action. Therefore, O Arjuna, become a devotee. And even among all devotees, he who, being full of faith, worships me, with his inmost self intent on me, is esteemed by me to be the most devoted.